Gather round the fire, friends. I've got a crazy case to tell you about. It's a real head-scratcher full of twists that'll leave you wondering what the hell actually happened here. This story takes place way out in the Australian outback. I'm talking miles and miles of hot, dusty nothingness. You could drive for hours and not see another living soul. Well, one night, a couple years back, this British couple, Peter and Joanne, were road tripping through the Northern Territory, right smack in the middle of the outback. They were in an orange camper van heading up the Stewart Highway on their way to Darwin. But around 7:30 p.m., a set of blinding headlights creeps up behind their camper. These high beams were right on their ass. Annoying, but they keep driving. That is, until this mystery vehicle floors it and whips around to drive parallel with Pete and Joanne. We're talking some real aggressive driving here. The van skids to a halt on the side of the highway. Then this dude jumps out and starts waving his arms around all wild. Something isn't right. The man claims their exhaust pipe is sparking all crazy, but Pete isn't convinced. He tells Joanne to wait while he checks it out. Pete grabs his smokes and they pop the hood of the camper. Meanwhile, Joanne can't take her eyes off this guy. His clothes are all disheveled, hair's a mess, and he won't stop pacing around the van. Something is real off about him. The next thing Joanne knows, bang, gunshot echoes through the silent desert night. And just like that, her boyfriend Pete hits the dirt without another sound. Silence again. Joanne screams frantically for Pete, but gets no answer. She jerks her head around to see the strange man walking steadily towards her door, silver pistol in hand. The terrified Joanne freezes as the man flings open her door, pointing the gun right at her head. He screams at her to duck down and put her hands behind her back. Joanne complies, her mind racing. As Joanne is forced onto the dirt road, she feels rough rope cinched tightly around her wrists and ankles. Then tape tugged over her mouth and wrapped around her neck. She could hardly breathe. The attacker drags Joanne toward his utility vehicle and throws a bag over her head, plunging her into darkness. Before Joanne can process anything else, she's tossed roughly into the back cage of the Ute. Joanne can hear the man shuffling around outside, grunting with effort. She cries out, "What do you want from me? Have you killed Pete?" But the angry stranger just yells, "One more word and you die too." Okay, message received. She shuts up real quick. After what feels like forever, Joanne hears the engine start up. She feels the Ute pull back onto the highway, picking up speed as they drive off into the night, leaving Pete's body behind on the deserted road. Joanne's mind races as the truck bumps along the dirt road. She had to escape somehow and get back to Pete, if he was even still alive. After driving for 15 agonizing minutes, the Ute takes a sudden sharp turn and pulls over again. Joanne hears the driver's side door slam shut as the man storms off. She doesn't hesitate. This is her only chance. She wiggles her bound hands free and leaps blindly from the back of the truck. Joanne hits the ground hard, her legs tied together, and tumbles into the prickly bushes. The bag over her head makes it impossible to see anything, but she crawls deeper into the scrub. Finding a dense patch, she buries herself in the leaves and waits. Before long, Joanne hears footsteps wander closer and closer. Beams from a flashlight dance through the trees, sometimes landing directly in her eyes. She holds her breath, trying not to make a sound, despite her pounding heart. The footsteps fade after what feels like hours of searching, and Joanne hears the truck door slam once again. The Ute engine roars to life and she listens as it drives away into the night. She did it. She got away. But now she was alone, still tied up in the dark wilderness, and she had no idea if her boyfriend was dead or alive. As the temperature plummeted, she knew she had to keep moving and try to find help before shock set in. Joanne shuffled on her knees towards the highway, rocks and sticks cutting her skin. The bag still secured over her face made it nearly impossible to see where she was crawling. After what felt like hours, Joanne finally reached the side of the road. A massive 18-wheel freight truck roared past, sending dust swirling. As it zoomed into the distance, Joanne leapt up, waving her arms wildly. This was her chance. If the truckers saw her, they could get help. The brake lights flash, and the truck groans to a halt. Joanne hobbles towards the cab, arms stretched out, pleading. She can hardly speak with the tape still strangling her neck. The driver, Vince, and his partner, Rodney, stare open-mouthed at the horrifying sight. A petrified young woman, stumbling alone in the darkness, tangled in restraints. Between heaving sobs, Joanne manages to share her trauma of the attack, Pete's shooting, and her own near abduction. She begs to be taken back to her boyfriend, if he was even still alive. These men know stopping in the Outback night is risky, but they can't leave Joanne stranded. They let her rest in the warm, safe truck while they drive the 30 miles to the nearest town. Around 2 a.m., they pull up. Joanne's still dazed and trembling when police finally arrive at daybreak. They comb the area and surprisingly discover pools of blood, confirming part of Joanne's story. Someone was attacked back on that highway, but there's no body and no Pete. In the coming days, the scene leaves more questions than answers. Police reveal the blood is Peter's, but find no weapon, bullet casings, or evidence he was shot. No footprints are uncovered, except 2 of Joanne's by the bushes. Surely a man and dog hunting with flashlights would leave tracks. Then, CCTV footage surfaces of an ominous man conveniently resembling Joanne's description. Baseball cap and flannel shirt, filling a jerry can that night at a petrol stop hours before the attack. But the tape is buried by police for weeks. Why hide evidence backing up Joanne's story? Things get fishier when 3 separate truck drivers come forward describing an orange VW van parked roadside with a white utility vehicle, but their statements are concealed too. It seems officers were hell-bent on making Joanne their prime suspect from day one. But why? Media digs deeper into Joanne's past for clues. Turns out, while dating Pete, she had a steamy month-long affair back in Sydney with some guy named Nick. And the scandalous fling didn't exactly end when they hit the road. Journalists discover Nick and Joanne had been calling each other upwards of 20 times a day during her travels with Pete. Wild, right? Reporters accuse her of being cold as ice when she refuses to discuss any of it. So, when Joanne shows up at a televised press conference 3 weeks after the attack in a hot pink midriff tee branded Cheeky Monkey, you better believe she got crucified. The tabloids have an absolute field day, calling her everything from Ice Queen to a conniving, husband-killing mastermind. But most damning of all was the total lack of emotion or tears, not exactly painting a portrait of a grieving partner. But it's not long before tips start flooding in that a sloppy drug runner named Bradley Murdoch could be our mystery murderer. Other truckers confirm Murdoch drove a beat-up white utility vehicle, just like the one reported at the crime scene, and the gangly 6'5" crook was known to carry a weapon similar to the handgun Joanne described. It takes nearly 2 years, but Murdoch's DNA mysteriously appears on evidence from the attack, leading to his dramatic arrest. He strongly denies any involvement though, despite Joanne easily selecting him from a suspect lineup. She maintains Murdoch was absolutely the crazed stranger who killed her partner Pete. As the saga continues, Bradley Murdoch's DNA inexplicably appears on the steering wheel and gear shift of Pete and Joanne's abandoned camper van. So, he had to have been inside at some point. A teeny DNA trace also shows up on the back of Joanne's shirt from that night. The odds of it belonging to anyone but Murdoch are 1 in 13,000. Pretty hard evidence to refute. As Murdoch's trial kicks off, his lawyers go hard, painting him as an easy scapegoat to pin the unsolved murder on. A vulnerable drug hauler society loves to loathe rather than a young female backpacker. After a grueling 9-week spectacle, a verdict is finally reached. Guilty on all charges. Bradley Murdoch is sentenced to 28 years behind bars without parole for the murder of Peter Falconio.
I therefore sentence you to 28 years in prison.
Jury found Bradley John Murdoch is the Outback killer, declaring him guilty of the British tourist's murder.
Mystery solved, it would seem. But while Bradley Murdoch may be behind bars, there are still those who wonder if Joanne was truly as innocent as she appeared. Could her stone-cold persona and misleading statements have been a cover for sinister secrets? Several theories suggest Pete's vanishing may have actually been orchestrated by Joanne herself. Some suggest Joanne shot Pete so she could collect insurance money and start a new life with her lover Nick. Others believe the couple had a violent row and Joanne killed Pete in a rage. Still more speculate Joanne and Nick plotted the fake hijacking together, but never imagined getting away with cold-blooded murder. If Joanne did mastermind such a brazen scheme, the lingering question remains: where is Pete's body hidden? And will detectives ever uncover the whole truth?